Alright, so in this video, I am going to be showing you how to create the bearings that go into these holes that we were talking about in our last video. Now we're only going to be making one bearing because once we get to assembly, we are going to just insert multiple of that one bearing that we make so you know it's exactly the same going into each of these holes. Alright, so what we're going to do is just make the center one. So we need to select our work plane to work off of. So we're going to do the top one. And we're going to click sketch to create a new sketch. I'm going to click the top of my view cube so I could see this a little bit better. And there we go. So like I said, we're going to make our first bearing in this center hole right here. So what we're going to do is take out 2 circles to start. So we're going to click our center circle, snap to the origin. We're going to make this one a little bit bigger than that hole there. And then we're going to make another one smaller inside. And that's it. So now we want to make different dimensions for these circles, of course. So the outer circle, we're going to click that equal, like we did in the other video to make them the same. So we're going to click equal the outer circle. Then we're going to click where this hole is on the body of the spinner. So not this hole, right, not our smaller hole, but this black line hole. So we want to click on that outside blue hole and this one right here. And if you did it correctly, that blue circle will go directly on top of that black circle and it'll vanish. All right, so that's okay. That's what we want to see. So then what we're going to do now is dimension the inside of the circle. So what we're going to do is click on that circle and we're going to make this center circle 0.315 and click enter. All right, now it turned black. We're good to go. All right, so all of these dimensions that I'm giving you are the exact dimensions of what a fidget spinner actually is. So once we're done, right, that's all we have to do for our bearing, is we're just going to rename our sketch, right? Because like I said, we don't want to get confused. We renamed our spinner body, so now we have to do our bearing. So I'm going to type bearing, click enter, and we are good to go. We can click the check mark. So now we will copy and paste this, which you'll see in a little bit once we get to assembly, so don't worry about doing it for the other 3. So now we have to extrude this bearing here. So we're going to click extrude, which is on the top next to sketch. And now we have to select the face and regions to extrude. But before I do that, I'm going to just say that we are not going to change the depth, and you'll see why. So don't worry about, because I know in the other video we first changed the depth. We're just going to go right to what we want to extrude. So I'm going to turn this to the side so you could see it a little bit better, and you might want to do the same. So if I hover over this bearing, you could see kind of like when we extruded the body, right? If I go to the hole, all that's going to do is just extrude that middle hole, which is what we do not want to do. All right, so what we do want to do is kind of get that donut, right? Kind of like what we saw in the body. We want that donut hole extruded, so it looks like that. All right, and we don't want to at all extrude the middle part here, all right, because we want the cap to go into this hole. So we want to keep that hollow. So, right, this is kind of sticking out far, right? And I said we're not going to change the depth. What we're going to do to make this a little bit simpler so we don't have to guess on how far down this has to go is we're going to go to where it says blind, and I'll bring a drop down. And you're going to click up to face. So it's the 3rd one down. And now you'll see it turned red, because what we have to do is we have to select a face to determine where this thing's going to extrude to. So the face that we're going to choose is this top one right here. And there we go. You could see that the bearing now extruded exactly flush onto our fidget spinner body, right? So you can see that it came up now. It's not sticking out. It's perfectly flush, and that's exactly what we want to see. So now all I'm going to do is rename this again to bearing, like we've been doing. Now there's one more thing that I have to tell you before you click that green check mark. So let me click it just to show you. If I click that green check mark, you see that now it's all blue, right? It's not a separate piece. We don't see that bearing anymore, right? And that's not what we want. That's because we're adding the material. So if we 3D printed this, it would all be one piece, which we don't want. It's a separate piece that goes into each other, right? It's a different part. So what we want to click, right? Because all of you like might, right? Because even I almost did it, right? Want to just click on that green check mark, but first you want to make sure you click new. And you could see it even changed the color because it's a totally new part, right? So now if we 3D printed this, it would come out and print as a separate total part, which is what we want to see because that thing rotates and spins for it to actually be a fidget spinner. All right, so you want to make sure that's very important that you don't have it on add, which you'll kind of see is all blue. You want to make sure it's on new, so it'll turn gray. And that's very, very, very important. So now when we click this, right, it'll should look like this with a gray piece in the center. So now if you go down here, you see now we have two different parts. So in the beginning, I didn't have you rename part one just because we were just working with one thing, but now we're working with multiple. So we're gonna rename this. So you're gonna just right click, click rename, and you're gonna name it spinner body. And you're gonna do the same thing for part two and rename it bearing. Just so we know what each part is, because we're gonna have a third part, which is the cap, which I'm going to show in the next video, so we don't want to get confused. So we're just trying to keep organized and have everything labeled or renamed. So make sure you rename everything before you go on to the next step. Also, please make sure that your fidget spinner looks like mine before you go on to the cap, which the cap is where your fingers are going to go. So it's very important that you do this step correctly. So make the cap, everything fits in the way that it should be.